Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Christian Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Steph Thurling. I'm the Executive Director of Christian Parenting, a mom of 3, and I am so glad that you're here. This is a place where you can bring your real self, no matter what that looks like today, and be given the space, resources, and encouragement you need to set aside perfection and grow into the perfectly imperfect parent God made you to be.
What's so special about Hero Bread's soft, fluffy, and delicious breads, buns, and tortillas? These ultra-low net-carb baked goods contain zero sugar, fewer calories, and more protein than the leading brands, and are high in fiber to support gut health. Shop now at hero.co.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining me today. I think you're going to love this episode. I am talking with Jess Connolly, and Jess is just so delightful and funny and down to earth. You're going to really love our conversation. Jess is an author, she's a podcaster, a Bible teacher, and a coach, and she's also a wife and mom of 4. Her newest book is called Tired of Being Tired, and how relatable is that? I think every parent ever has said that phrase. Today, Jess shares her personal journey of discovering the need for rest and the misconceptions surrounding it. She emphasizes the significance of understanding God's design for rest and how it can positively impact our lives. And then she provides practical tips for prioritizing rest in daily life and encourages overwhelmed parents to seek God's guidance and grace. Jess shares so much wisdom throughout this episode. You will leave with encouragement and practical tips for realistically creating a place of rest in your life. Jess, welcome to the Christian Parenting Podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I think this is going to be fun. We got to chat. I mean, we just met, but for the first time a little bit before we start recording. I think it's going to be a fun conversation.
I'm so grateful. I can't wait.
Yeah. Okay. First, I want to talk a little about your family because we like to talk about families here. So tell us about you and your family, and then describe your family in one word or phrase.
I love this. The word came to me immediately because I call my family this all the time.
Oh, I can't.
I'm Jess. My husband, Nick, and I live here in Charleston, South Carolina, where we lead a church that we planted 10 years ago. And we have 4 kids who are 17, 16, 15, and 11. So my first 3 are Irish triplets. They're all 1 year apart. And then I have a little break. Then I have my baby. And I'm also in a tender week for my family because the way the Lord wrote my family is that my bookend boys, what I call them, my oldest and my youngest, their birthdays are 3 days apart, and they just had their birthdays. So my baby, every year this week, I'd be like, my baby's not a baby anymore. And then I have to come to terms with the fact that my oldest is basically an adult. So yesterday was my oldest 17th birthday. So I'm processing, taking all the deep breaths that my family's
You still have
growing up.
another year till he's an adult. He's not an adult.
That's true. That's true. And then from what I hear, that's when the real parenting starts. So I'm just holding on to my hat. But the one word I often use to describe our family is wild. We are a wild bunch. There is not a quiet one in our entire family. If you're ever in our house, all you will hear is laughing and loud voices and a lot of movement. We're wild.
How was that when you had like a 1, 2, and 3-year-old and they were wild?
It was mind numbing. I always tell people I don't remember a lot of those years, but even when they were 1, 2, and 3, and 2, 3, and 4, 4, 5, and 6, I didn't have a quiet kid. I did not have a gentle kid. I didn't have one who just liked to read and was a little more shy. We didn't have that. Not one of our 4 kids is like that. They are all boisterous. They all take up space. They all have desires and ideas and dreams, and they move a lot and they talk a lot. And my husband and I look at each other and we're like, what? Not one of them? Not one, serene, peaceful, go with the flow? Okay, cool.
We have a lot of passion in our family.
Yes.
And mine are younger than yours, but I literally looked at our nanny the other day and I was like, just one. Why didn't I just get one? That was just going to be a little less I don't know, didn't fight me on everything.
Right.
They're just
Literally.
all a little
When
spirited.
when other moms will like describe one of their kids and they'll say like, she's just the one who like is always helping me out, or he's just the one who will check in on me. I'm like, are you kidding? Is
Yeah.
that a real thing? But other parents say that's a thing. But anyways, I love my wild kids. They're
Yeah.
wild in the most beautiful kingdom way, and so I'm glad they are who they are.
Well, it's probably fun now too as they're getting older and you have
Yes.
1 year till adulthood. You still got time. But like to see how they're developing into young adults and like becoming their own
Yeah.
people and how they're going to
Yeah.
serve God's kingdom and with their wild
Yeah.
ways. Like that's so fun. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other thing I always ask, it's what's the one thing you want every parent to know?
I love this question because I say let's go straight for it.
Let's
This
do
is
it.
kind of deep, but
I like deep.
I really want every parent to be able to communicate what they believe their job is as a parent. Because I think a lot of us are walking around with some expectations that maybe we wouldn't say out loud, but some expectations and some motivations and even some job descriptions that God didn't give us that we're
Mm.
perceiving as our job. And I think that if we could communicate, hey, my job as a mom or my job as a dad is this, if we could communicate that clearly and make sure it's what God's invited us into, and even something that we can do in our human capacity, it would help a lot.
Yeah. I've never really thought about that before, but that's good.
Thank you. Thanks. It's helping me a lot. I think, yeah, to flesh it out. For a long time, I thought my job as a mom was to create, especially my job as a Christian mom, is to create Christian kids.
Mm.
And then I realized, theologically, biblically, that is actually not within my capacity.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I can't make sure my kids get saved. There is no equation. There is no way I can train them. There is no way I can teach them that will ensure that will happen. And so therefore God would not put that responsibility on me. And it helps me remember like that's actually his to hold, not mine to hold. So my job becomes something else, right?
Yeah.
My job has to become something else about maybe showing them what it looks like to walk with God, or just encouraging them to be who he made them to be. But I think for a lot of us, we might end up saying it in really different ways, what we think our role is. And I think that's beautiful too. So I think just being able to say what that is, so we're not living into expectations that God didn't give us, is so important.
Yeah. I love that. I want to say like it would be so great if you left the hospital with like a job description.
It
But
would be
then
cute, wouldn't it?
everybody's job
Yeah.
description would be different because we're
Right.
all different moms and we all have different
Right.
giftings as moms.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it would be convenient, wouldn't it?
It
Like,
would.
here's what you do. Here's your manual. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about exhaustion. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
that kind of like ties in really because trying to do
Yep.
God's job and save our kids and raise perfect Christian
Yes.
kids leaves us pretty exhausted when it's not truly
Yes.
our job. And you have a new book, Tired of Being Tired. And I love that. I can't even count how many times I have like near tears told my husband, like, I'm so tired of being tired. Like
Yes.
I think we all have.
Yes.
And there are certain
Yeah.
parts of parenting where you're just going to be tired. Like if you have a baby,
Absolutely.
you're just tired. And that just
Yeah.
is the way it is. But we're kind of talking about a
Yeah.
different type of tired.
Yeah.
I thought that I would be not tired once my kids slept through the night. Or like once they were in school full time. I was like, then I'm just going to
Yep.
be not tired. But I'm
Right.
still tired. It's just different.
Yep.
So we get to talk about that because I don't think I'm alone. Obviously, you would agree. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about your journey of getting here, like writing about rest. How did you come
Yeah.
to be here?
I love that question. And I'm with you. It's funny, when I started writing the book, I did ask the question, when did I first really feel tired? Like when did I consistently say that this is one of the top words that I would use to describe my life? And interestingly for me, it happened way before I had kids.
Mm.
But we can talk about that in a second. So so I described, a little bit of what our life is like. It's fairly full. And I don't know if you're anything like me. I read a bunch of books on rest. I would read books on rest I could get my hands on. And at the end, I would find myself really defeated because I didn't have the capacity to change my whole life. And sometimes I'd read books on rest and I would think, well, that must be nice for people who can go on a silent retreat, or that must be nice for people who can cancel work events. I can't. Or that might, that must be nice for people who can like change these things about their family. I can't. This is the life God's written for me. And so then I'd feel shame and I'd feel defeat about my fatigue. And then I'd just kind of just tried to numb it and like push the button and keep going. And for me, what happened is really starting in 2020, starting with the pandemic. I think because of what we were just talking about, because of my misunderstanding about what was my responsibility and what was God's responsibility in multiple different arenas in my life, in my work, also in my parenting, also in my friendships, I started to develop a really intense sense of over responsibility that pushed me past my normal limits of exhaustion. So I wasn't just the same kind of like normal cultural, like, oh, I'm busy, tired, but good. I wasn't that kind of like normal tired anymore. I was really starting to experience some spiritual and physical and mental fatigue that left me really at the point of breakdown. I was kind of having a breakdown. And in the midst of all this, I was already an author. I'd already written 10 books. And I went really to the Lord and said, okay, if Matthew 11 is true, if Jesus says, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest. What does that look like? And what does that mean for me? And why is every single woman I know tired, especially maybe even more so the Christian women? What are we missing? And what's actually true for us? And so studying and researching and praying and wrestling over that topic is really what led me to writing the book.
Yeah. And what did you find that surprised you?
Yeah. Well, about 80,000 words worth, but I'm going to summarize
Give me a little one.
I'll give you the taste. My problem is if you ask me, I really will say 80,000 words as an answer, hence my over responsibility issues. But I'll try to capsize it a little quicker. So the biggest thing I learned is that a lot of us are not receiving God's rest for a variety of reasons. We're not receiving God's rest, number one, because we believe some lies or we have some blockages that are keeping us from resting. So we think we have to earn rest, or we think rest is lazy, or we're really just maybe even not willing to pay the price that resting will cost us if we go at a different pace or we lose the approval of others. And so there's all this kind of like mental and emotional and spiritual turmoil in general that we have to reroute our ideas around and figure out like, who told me that? Why do I believe that? Why am I not taking this rest either on a daily basis or on a weekly basis? And what is my belief about God in this? So we kind of have some like spiritual, emotional, mental work to do first. The next big thing I found is that another reason why a lot of us are not receiving rest is because we don't know what kind of tired we are. And there's actually at least 4 major types of fatigue. So there's spiritual fatigue, there's emotional fatigue, there's physical fatigue, and there's mental fatigue. And a lot of us, especially moms, especially parents, we're going to be like, oh no, it's just physical for me. Like I'm just yawning a lot. I'm just tired. I need more sleep. I have a baby that doesn't sleep through the night, etc. But really for a lot of us, it's all of the other types of fatigues mixed in. And so when we do try to rest, we might not be receiving the kind of rest we actually need. And this is why we wake up from a nap and we're like more fussy than when we went to sleep. Or this is why we wake up in the morning after maybe getting 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep and we still feel existential dread. This is why we go on a vacation and we come home and we say, I need a vacation from my vacation. Because we might not be hitting the points of fatigue that are really plaguing us in this season. So we've got to find our fatigue, which the book helps people do. And then the last thing I found is that actually, this is the part for me that was really experimental and I wanted to test it before I wrote about it. But the most realistically fruitful kinds of rest are ones that we can do every single day that are just little sips, little bits of rest where we can receive that from God and take those moments for ourselves. I realized it wasn't the silent retreats, it wasn't the vacations, it was all of these more little practical things that we could actually just do and stop making the exceptions around them. And those would help us experience some relief from our fatigue on a daily basis.
Yeah. Okay, I want to get into the practical, but first I want to touch
Yeah.
on, because I love how you come at rest and it being tired and fatigued from different perspectives, like including the
Yeah.
spiritual exhaustion. I think that's
Yeah.
just so powerful. So, how tell us kind of more about that, and then like how is rest
Yeah.
part of God's design for our lives?
Oh, great questions. Okay. So when we're talking about spiritual fatigue, I find that this is the one that's the most nebulous. And people are like, that sounds interesting. I think I might be
Mhm.
spiritually tired, but I have no idea what that means. And it's so helpful that we talked about that at the beginning of the podcast, this idea that like, what is our job as moms? Because that's one way it really showed up for me. So for a lot of us, I believe spiritual fatigue looks like misunderstanding what God has asked from us or what he expects from us, but also misunderstanding the point of our relationship with God and what he wants from us, and maybe not so much for us. So what I find a lot in Christian moms is that are like, I need to read my Bible. I need to be doing some kind of Bible study with my kids. We need to be going to church. We should be praying more. We should be serving. We should definitely be giving. We need to be doing this. We need to be doing that. And we need to be doing all of this because it gives God glory. Or we need to be doing all of this, to handle our family culture well. Or we should be doing this because if you train up a child in the way they will go, they won't depart from it. And there's all of this should, and there's all of this like things that we start to perceive that God wants from us. When really all of our life in Christ is about God wanting intimacy and joy and abundance for us. He's wanting nearness for us, with him. He's wanting our relationship to unfurl and develop with him. He knows that togetherness or reading time or spending time reading his word or spending time in his presence, none of it is about like performing for him. None of it is about making him decide that he loves us. All of it can be done either for his approval or from his approval. And so I think, again, especially as parents, we think of parenting as this task that we have to be doing well to perform some project, to do some test, to pass the test, to say, like, we did it, we made good kids. And I wonder what it would look like to shake our heads and say, oh, actually, God gave me this family to steward for my joy, for his glory, for sure. But not because he wants to like figure out if I'm good enough, and not because he wants me to earn someplace in his kingdom, but actually just because he loves me and he placed me in this family on purpose for our good and his glory. So that's where a lot of that spiritual fatigue starts to come in, is really just thinking about our motivation. Why am I doing what I do? Am I doing it to gain God's love for me, or I'm doing it just because I'm working from God's love for me?
I've shared a little bit about how hospitality is one of the core values in our house. I love making my home as welcoming and comfortable as possible for my family and for any guests that we have. This is one of the reasons I love Home Threads. Home Threads can be your trusted partner in creating a loving and inspired home. At homethreads.com, you can explore furniture designed with the values of Christian parenting in mind. From prayerful spaces to family-friendly comfort, their pieces are crafted to nurture your children's hearts and souls. Home Threads has everything you need for every room of your house, from bedding and decor to kitchenware, blankets, and even furniture. You can visit homethreads.com/CP podcast today and get your code for 15% off of your order. Raising a family with your values should be reflected in every corner of your home, and with Home Threads, you can love where you live.
What's so special about Hero Bread's soft, fluffy, and delicious breads, buns, and tortillas? These ultra-low net-carb baked goods contain zero sugar, fewer calories, and more protein than the leading brands, and are high in fiber to support gut health. Shop now at hero.co.
So the second question there was, shoot, I'm trying to remember what, it was such a good question.
How is rest part of God's design for our lives?
How is rest part of good? That's
I'm
the
impressed I can
question,
remember that
right?
actually.
I am so impressed. That's such a great question. And truly the core of the answer when we start to kind of work through some of these lies or blockages that are keeping us from rest is because we don't understand God's design of our lives and of his kingdom and of this earth and where he put rest in them. So one of the most interesting things I found in researching, which I had heard this before, but I didn't really quite understand how it changes everything about how we approach God. One of the most interesting things we find about rest is right in creation. And when I start to say this, people are like, oh, we know God rested when he made the world. We all know that. We all know God rested. It's wild. We don't actually think on it a lot, but it's pretty crazy that he modeled rest for us. It's pretty beautiful. But even before that, when God is creating day and night, evening and morning, we see he makes the sun, so he creates day. And then we see he makes the moon, so he creates night. But right before he sets the world into motion, he switches the order and it says, and then there was evening and morning the first day. So God establishes the earth on the idea that we rest first and then we work. We don't work, and then collapse. We don't push, and then we've somehow earned our rest. There was evening and there was morning the first day. You get to rest first and then you work. You work from your rest. You live from your rest. You parent from your rest. But you take the rest as intentionally as you take the work. So we see that right there, but then also we see the triune Godhead actively engaging in resting. Actually, the word that says the Holy Spirit hovered over the water at creation. We actually know that word in Hebrew to be rested. Holy Spirit rested over the water at creation. God our Father rested on the seventh day after he made the earth. Jesus rests throughout his entire ministry when he had such a short span of time to do so much work. And we still see at least 22 times in the gospel where he pulls away from people with such a short span, so much important things to do. And he's still like, hold on, I got to get with the Father. Hold on, I got to rest. Hold on, I have to sleep in the middle of this storm. And so we see God modeling rest so well for us. And so not only does he give it to us as this good gift, there was evening and there was morning the first day. Not only does he model it for us, but then as a bonus, he meets us in our rest so we can experience his intimacy and joy and healing and goodness and kindness and mercy and compassion. And I could keep going on and on.
I mean, I could listen for a really long time because this is all so good. And I can't help but think we talk a lot on this podcast about how important it is to like model our faith for our kids.
Yeah.
And as you're speaking, I can't help but think like, what are we modeling towards our kids when we're spiritually exhausted because we're trying to do something God isn't asking us to do? Like, what are we modeling to our kids with that? And that is a challenge to really think about.
It's wild. It's interesting. So, I mean, a line I use a lot is like, it's pretty crazy how we're all trying to obey God by disobeying God. Like we're all trying to obey God by pretending like he didn't say, take a Sabbath, take a day off in the Ten Commandments, even starting there. But honestly, the Sabbath predates the law. Like there was Sabbath before there was law. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty crazy how many of us are trying to obey God by not obeying God. But what's more is it's so interesting. And I'm glad you said this. I mean, all of the questions, like I would say 90% of the questions I get about rest or Sabbath or what rhythms, you do, 90% of the questions are focused on like, well, I'm a mom with young kids. What do I do? Or, oh, I don't think you understand this. Like my kids are really busy. And I love working with women and I love working with parents to say like, hey, let's get creative. Let's stop having this reactive defeat that says like, oh, rest won't work for me. You don't understand. I have a family. Where I would pause and say like, actually, God knows you have a family. I don't know if you noticed, but like God has a son. He still rested. But Jesus had like a lot to do on earth and he still took a nap. It's cool. But let's don't like immediately respond with this reactive defeat. But more than that, let's start a new conversation and say, actually, maybe how much more important is it that when your kids are 1, 2, 3, 10, 13, 18, 25, that they see you taking this gift from God so seriously that maybe you receive it in a way that might change some parts of your life, that might change some of your rhythms. But how much more important is it for kids to see moms and dads resting, right?
Yeah. What are some of the things that you have found? Because you mentioned doing like the small little things, not the silent retreat, because as you said,
Right.
you are a wild family. So, how does your wild family prioritize rest?
Yeah. There's a couple of different ways for us. I mean, number one, the practice of Sabbath together has really changed our lives. And for us, Sabbath doesn't mean that I'm not parenting. It doesn't mean that we're not making dinner. It doesn't mean that maybe, like, I'm not asking my kids to take out the trash because, as Jesus tells us in Mark 2, Sabbath is made for the man isn't made for the Sabbath. So we're not trying to like obey some Pharisaical laws that he didn't ask us to do. But we are coming together as a family and looking at each other and saying, how can we most enjoy God and one another for 24 hours? How can we stop working for 24 hours and just enjoy God and his creation? So that looks like family game nights, or maybe going out to dinner, or using paper plates instead of washing dishes for one night. Letting the laundry pile up for 24 hours because, let's be honest, it was piled up before and it's going to be piled up after. So engaging in some of those weekly rhythms have been really helpful for us. But I would say also just on a daily basis, like implementing little rhythms around our house, like morning and evening routines, have been really helpful. Having conversations with my kids when I see, especially as our kids get older, as they start to communicate some of the expectations and the pressures and the stresses that they feel, having compassion for them in the same way that God has compassion for us and saying, like, I totally understand that you feel that pressure. Now let's see how we can kind of strategize some rest for you, whether it's spiritual or mental or emotional, etc., together. So those are some of the ways that have worked for our family. But I would say the biggest thing that I think has helped me as a mom is just knowing that I can rest in front of my kids. And even if I don't invite them into it, and even if I'm not teaching them something about it, when they see somebody come up to me at church and say like, hey, would you be willing to like volunteer or bring some treats to this event? And I pause and say, you know what? I'm really not sure I'm going to have to pray about it. I'm not sure I have the margin. That's one way I can wildly teach my kids about rest, right? By just saying like, I'm going to appreciate my own limitations and boundaries and see if I actually have time for that, or letting my kids see me say like, I know the laundry's sitting there, but I'm not going to do it right now because I'm going to enjoy and hang out with your dad for a minute. Or, oh my gosh, my to-do list is so long, but look at that. It's the weekend. I'll come back on Monday. Letting my kids see me rest, maybe in a way that defies some expectations that I've put on me or other people have put on me. I think it's revolutionary, and it teaches them that they can do the same either now or later.
Yeah. And I like the way that you're describing a lot of very simple things throughout your day that you can do instead of, because I think the idea of a full Sabbath on the weekend and like a 24-hour thing is so great. But so many people, you're exactly right, are like, absolutely not. Like, I cannot do that. Like, that's just too
Right.
long. We don't have the
Right.
time. We don't have the margin. And I just love your encouragement that it doesn't have to be that way. Like, all of our rest doesn't have to look
Yeah.
the same.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's going to look different in different seasons of our family.
Mm.
It's going to look different for different personalities of families. Like, again, my family's wild. Maybe somebody's family is really docile and sweet and they want to sit together and read. Praise God. I love that. Maybe could you rub off on my kids? But
Yeah.
we're going to play Monopoly and it's going to be loud.
Are you going to cry? Because we just played Monopoly for the first time as a family, and it took 3 days. And
It
there
does
were
take 3 days.
I think everyone but one person cried, including me. I didn't cry.
I am
but
so sorry. And we have definitely been through the crying Monopoly phase. We're out of the crying Monopoly phase, but we had to get through the tears, and we definitely had some painful games.
Yeah, it was they want to play it again, so we'll do it. But it was like, you guys, I'm like sitting there trying to be like, see, I'm losing too. It's fine. But there were still tears.
I love it.
Tears. Yeah. Okay, so what would you, to kind of end our time, like really practically, we've kind of done a lot of practically. So maybe speak to the heart. Like, what would your encouragement be to the mom who is listening to this and being like, yes, but still, I have so much to get done and I just don't know how. This has not been taught to me. This has not been modeled to me. I don't even know where to start. Like, what would your encouragement be to that parent?
I love that question. One of the coolest things about being parents is that I think a lot of times one of the hard parts about being parents is we're processing maybe how we weren't parented well, or we're
Mhm.
processing how we haven't seen this done well, or I think a lot of us, right, in 2024 feel like we're just forging new ground, or we're pioneering something new, or we're trying something that wasn't done 20 or 30 years ago for us, or 40 years ago. But one of the coolest things is that we can continually go back to God and remember that He is our parent, that He is parenting us. And a lot of times when I'm feeling stuck in my rest, or when I'm feeling defeated, or about like this is never going to work, or I'm never going to be able to figure it out, or I'm never going to be able to try new things, I will try to picture how God is toward me in that feeling, right?
Mm.
I'll try to think like, is he looking at me saying it's always going to be this way? She's always going to be a mess. Or is he coming toward me continually and saying like, I just Psalm 127, I give rest to those I love. I love you. I don't want you to spin like this. And so for anyone who's kind of stuck in that defeated, reactive feeling of it's always going to be this way, I would say, is that what you would say to your kids?
Mm.
If they came to you and said, I'm exhausted, would you say, yeah, it's going to always be this way? Probably because you're doing it all wrong. No, you'd say to them, I'm so sorry. I know this world is a lot. It's a lot.
Mm.
What can we do? How can we make a few small shifts? And I think we're missing out again on letting God parent us when we just keep saying like, it's always going to be this way. It's always going to be this way. But we're also missing out on the generational blessing of watching our kids learn from us right now. And so let God parent you, but also parent your kids by fighting this reactive feeling that says, I'm always going to be this exhausted. Nobody understands. It's always going to be this way in my life. We serve a very big God who's very kind and a great communicator. And I really do trust that if we pay attention to what lies we're believing about rest and where we're actually fatigued, I think that we truly, truly, truly will find some practical and realistic steps to help us receive what it is He's giving to us.
Yeah. That's such a good reminder, too, that we are so much gentler with our kids than we are to ourselves, right? Like
Yeah.
we could be there are times I'm going through some of the same struggles as one of my kids, and I'll talk to them and
Yeah.
give them all this encouragement and truth. But in my mind, like it doesn't apply to me because we're just
Yeah.
not as nice to ourselves.
I
We
know.
should be.
I know. Yeah.
What we do as moms, though. But we're going to
we're
try
all
not
gonna
to do
we're
that.
all gonna grow. Yeah, we're
Yes.
growing. We're growing.
Yeah, for sure. It's part of the journey. I
Hmm.
appreciate everything that you have shared. Can you tell us like where we can get a copy of the book for people who want to know more, learn more, read all about rest and just enter into this lifestyle? Can you point us to the book and then tell us how we can connect with you?
Absolutely. So the book is called Tired of Being Tired. It should be available on most retailer websites, Amazon, Target, Barnes& and Noble. After April 9th, you'll be able to find it in most stores such as those. On jessconnolly.com, you can find all the info about the book. You can download the first chapter for free. You can take a quiz on helping you find the sources of your fatigue. And you can also get fun gifts when you pre-order a book or two books.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then how can people connect with you outside website, social media?
Yes, Jess A. Connolly. Jess A.
Okay.
Connolly on all social media sites. Twitter. I don't think people are using Twitter that much anymore. Threads, Facebook, Instagram, all the spots.
All the things. Okay. I'll put all that stuff in show notes. Thank you so much for joining me. This was really fun and just so encouraging. I think people are going to very much enjoy this conversation. So thank you.
I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for having me, truly. And thank you guys for your work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're inspired by what Jess has had to share. My challenge to you this week is to find some rest for yourself in the small moments. Remember that you are modeling the importance of rest and Sabbath to your kids, so let's model it well. May God bless you this week. The world may be crazy and busy and exhausting, but in God we can find peace and rest. So may you find true rest in Him and His promises this week. Remember, He loves you and cares for every part of you, including the tired parts. You don't need to do His job. You need to turn your face towards Him in worship. Thank Thank you so much for listening to the Christian Parenting Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you love this podcast, would you please consider leaving a review and sharing it with a friend? This is the best way to reach more people and encourage even more parents. Christian Parenting is a donor-funded ministry, and we rely on friends like you to keep podcasts like this going. So to find out more about Christian parenting and to make a donation, head over to christianparenting.org or at christianparenting_org on Instagram. Thank you again. See you next week.
Hey there! Did you know Kroger always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Kroger app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Kroger today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.